Aurora, Texas UFO incident. It was almost dawn on April 17, 1897, when inhabitants of a rural American town saw a single alien spacecraft lose control over the skies of Texas. A young boy saw an airship trailing smoke as it headed north toward the town of Aurora, slowing and speeding as it tried to regain control over its trajectory. It sailed over the public square, reaching the northern part of the town where it clipped the edge of a windmill at speed, then veering into the path of the town's water tower where, upon contact, blew into a number of pieces, large and small, in a terrific explosion, scattering debris over several acres of ground and awakening many of the town's residents. The residents that awoke went to investigate the source of their early wake-up call. What they found would astound and stupefy the townspeople. Having read about numerous mystery airships in national newspapers recently, including an abduction attempt, they wondered if this was something not only extraterrestrial, but also nefarious in nature. On locating the ship's sole occupant, although the pilot was dead and disfigured from the crash, they soon realized that he was clearly not an inhabitant of this world. Furthermore, strange markings in the manner of hieroglyphic characters were seen on the internal control panel. Terrified of the unknown, the townspeople hurriedly buried the body in the local cemetery, and removing the wreckage in the hope that the incident would disappear from the town's history. But that would not be the end of this. Some decades later, an investigative reporter wanted to find out once and for all the facts behind this extraterrestrial cover-up. The investigator began with trying to locate the remains of the spacecraft itself. One Aurora resident interviewed claimed the whole thing was a fabrication, maintaining there had never been a windmill for the craft to collide with in that town. It turns out there was no windmill to be seen. However, further investigations revealed the remains of a windmill base were found. Was this Aurora resident still continuing the cover-up all these years after? More was added to the mystery, as the nearby site of the old windmill was a deep well. A sweep of the well would reveal metals in the water itself, some elements such as aluminium and silver, but others that were unidentifiable in this planet's periodic table. Could this water well be where the spacecraft's parts had been dumped back in 1897? The presence of metals surprised the well's owner. However, he disclosed that having started using the well, he began to feel pains in his joints and soon diagnosed with early onset arthritis that could be associated with contaminated water. With the location of the spacecraft possibly found, the investigator moved to locate the extraterrestrial pilot. He went to the Aurora Cemetery, and ground-penetrating radar and photos from prior visits brought to light an unmarked grave in an area near other burials from the 1890s. He discovered a grave marker and headstone that seemed to show a spacecraft of some sort, as well as faint readings from his metal detector again. This was surely the conclusive evidence he was looking for. After putting the pieces together, the investigator returned to the town, looking to ask for permission from the Cemetery Association to perform an exhumation, and to conduct a more major operation of retrieving the spacecraft's pieces from the well. Not only did the Cemetery Association refuse his request, but upon returning to the site to take photos, not only had the grave marker mysteriously disappeared, but the metal readings now showed nothing. Returning to the well, the investigator had a feeling he knew what he'd find. The metal detector now also didn't pick up anything either. The UFO landing in Aurora, Texas would remain an unexplained mystery. Berwin Mountain Incident. On January 23, 1974, the locals in the Berwin Mountains area of Wales heard an alarming noise and saw a beam of light in the sky. When neurologists speculated that an unidentified flying object crashed and the British government hid the military's recovery, tabloids in the area mockingly referred to it as the Walsh incident. There were over 5 reports of a UFO sighting that night, and a search and rescue team was assembled to locate the crash, but it was never found. There was scientific confirmation that the event was generated by an earthquake, along with a large meteor widely observed over Wales and northern England, casting a bright light in their direction. The Institute of Geological Sciences claimed that an earthquake of 3.5 magnitude was experienced at 8:38 p.m. over a wide area of northern Wales and as far away as Formby, a town about 13 miles north of Liverpool. There was a police investigation into the incident showing that it was not immediately identified as an earthquake. If the magnitude of the shock was such that it had been due to an aircraft crash, the resulting crater would have been large enough to easily be visible. There are many theories about the unusual lights reported, but the most popular is that it may have been simply the meteor, but may have also included the phenomenon known as earthquake light. Earthquake light is a luminous aerial phenomenon that appears in the sky at or near areas of tectonic stress. The incident was dismissed as just that, an earthquake and a meteor combining. The meteor descended from 120 kilometers in the sky before disappearing over Manchester. Albelic and the Philadelphia experiment. He claims to have been at the very center of the Philadelphia experiment, which may be one of the biggest conspiracy theories of the 20th century. If you are unfamiliar with the Philadelphia experiment, it's an event that took place in 1943 when the United States Navy supposedly teleported the USS Eldridge from Philadelphia to Norfolk, Virginia. The ship was made invisible and just appeared at its final location. During the trip from one state to the next, some men were said to have gone missing, whilst others ended up becoming fused to the ship itself. With such an outlandish story, it's difficult to believe such a thing really happened. Albelic claims to have been a part of this experiment and has shared many details regarding the events that may or may not have transpired. He provided historical details that could be verified, as well as specifics on the people and places that were involved. Bielik has made further claims that Nikola Tesla was part of the experiment and that two men were sent 40 years into the future and then returned back to the ship. Whilst that alone is crazy to think about, he also believes that these types of experiments date back to 1931 when Tesla had found a way to make objects invisible. Bielik also explains that he and his brother were commissioned in 1983 to travel in between this wormhole to destroy all of the equipment that was on the USS Eldridge. They apparently had to go back to the past to avoid their arrival in 1983 that was causing many problems. When attempting to go back in time, they claim to have accidentally ended up in 2137, spending many weeks in a hospital bed recovering from burns they endured during their teleportation. Bielik then was said to have travelled to 2749, spending 2 years living in that time period. Aside from this travel to the future, Bielik stated that there were many floating cities that could be transported to other parts of the planet. In this world, the population was apparently only 300 million people, and he explained that it was because only few could adapt to this new environment. There were no military or soldiers or any conflict between countries. There were also no government systems in place, and computers had eliminated all physical labour. Money was also not needed in this future world, where people had credits they could use to buy anything they needed, whenever they needed it. Although Bielik's stories about the future certainly sound interesting, he has been unable to truly prove that he was involved in the Philadelphia experiment and that any of what he said is real. Do you think he experienced all these things, or was he making it up? Could he have perhaps experienced these things in his mind, but not in the physical world? Until others come forward to back his beliefs, it will be challenging for him to find those that believe his word as truth. The Mysterious Cat Shabib. In 1948, British diplomat Sir Alec Kirkbride made an awe-inspiring discovery in southern Jordan, ancient walls that spread 150 kilometers, this making them Jordan's longest archaeological site. The Cat Shabib walls have since been analysed and studied by a range of researchers, scientists and archaeologists. To this day, the construction of the Cat Shabib remains a total mystery to us. Some scholars claim they were built during the Iron Age, while others argue it was during the Nabatean era. Academics believe that the wall was used and composed by the Bedouin people. Their culture was semi-nomadic and relied heavily on farming and herding in Jordan's desert landscape. As such, the wall was likely not used for military tactics or strategy, but rather meant to be a border. In recent times, the Cat Shabib has gained renown in archaeological circles, with various scholars wanting to learn more about it and its origins. The Cat Shabib mostly goes through the desert of Jordan, but according to records, it begins close to the Wadi al-Hassa, another historic landmark, and passes by various ancient urban villages and towns such as Shobak and Marn. The Cat Shabib is not the only archaeological site of merit in the area, as the nearby landscape includes the Wadi Rum and Petra. As such, the Cat Shabib makes an excellent tourist destination. The wall itself was named after Emir Shabib al-Madawi, an Arabian prince of the al-Madawi Emirate who ruled over Transjordan. In the Arabic language, cat refers to the word line, so the most direct translation would interpret the Cat Shabib to simply Shabib's wall. Various attempts have been made to try and date the wall. One particular study involved analysing the rocks of the wall to date it back chronologically. The study relied on sun-bleached wall samples, and results revealed that the walls seemed to have been built anywhere between 400 and 100 BCE. This establishes the wall to have been created during the Iron Age, which lasted from 539 BCE to 332 BCE. Despite these findings, some scholars continue to argue they were built even earlier. Alongside the sun-bleached analysis of the rock, archaeologists have been able to find artifacts to help more accurately date when the walls were used. Pottery shards have been found close to the Cat Shabib, but there were not as many artifacts as researchers hoped, and nowhere near enough to base a time period on artifact remnants alone. It's thought that they match the proposed Iron Age date. It's believed the wall took several eras to be constructed, but no one is quite sure how long it took. The Unsolved Mystery of Armand B. Johnson at Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. Sometimes not all mysteries of lives taken within national parks are the case of an off-trail incident, an innocent mistake, or a fun day out gone suddenly wrong. While those cases are truly horrific, there are some that have a far more sinister side. A case like this one is the unsolved mystery of the deceased Armand B. Johnson. The 44-year-old man was found in the Hawaii Volcanoes National Park in 2005. He was found dead, with his autopsy revealing the cause of his passing to be from a singular firearm wound, which struck him in the upper back and lower neck area. It was an unlucky passerby who stumbled across Armand Johnson's body close to the 71-mile marker along the route back in April of 2005. Johnson had worked at several local resorts as a massage therapist, had a degree in sports medicine, and hosted a reggae music show on a local radio station. Between these different vocations, he had a strong influence upon the community, and years on, his death continues to shock many. The FBI had a limited amount of information regarding the case. Between the lack of evidence and the secluded area, there was a lack of leads available. 10 years on, in 2015, they appealed to the public, offering a reward of $10,000 if anyone was able to come forth with any relevant information to the case. FBI Special Agent in Charge, Paul D. Delacourt, mentioned that it was hoped that the passage of time would allow any witnesses to feel as though they could come forward and share what they know. To this day, we don't know why, how, or who it was that committed this violent, horrific crime. Hexham Head. In 1971, two brothers, Leslie aged 8 and Colin aged 11, lived at 3 Reed Avenue in Hexham, England, and were digging outdoors in their family's back garden. For a child, digging can be a great source of entertainment, and it's instantly up-leveled when an interesting discovery is made. In the holes the boys were creating, they spotted 2 round objects, each about the size of a small apple. They appeared to be some sort of carved head. It is undetermined what the heads were actually made of, but during that time it was believed that they were carved from some sort of stone. The Robson brothers were eager to show their parents what they had found. The precious new possessions were left on the main floor of the Robson house, and the family headed upstairs to bed for the night. Little did they know something very out of the ordinary was about to happen. The family members found that the heads had moved when they checked on them in the morning. This was an odd thing, but not too alarming. Later on, however, it seems that one of the boys had their hair pulled by an invisible being. There was broken glass found in the beds of the Robson sisters. There was a glowing outside coming from the areas where the heads were extracted from the ground. An especially terrifying occurrence happened in the middle of the night. The mother of the family saw a half-man, half-goat beast inside of the house. She watched, frozen with fear. The neighbours of the Robsons also reported seeing a mysterious animal in their home, half man, half sheep. Is it possible it could have been the same creature? Dr. Anne Ross, an expert in Celtic artefacts, was given the opportunity to study the heads. While the heads were under her care in her home, Dr. Ross reported that she woke up one morning and saw a part wolf, part man individual leaving the room. She was able to track it down the stairs and watch it head toward the kitchen when it disappeared out of sight. Her daughter also gives an account of seeing something that looked like a dark werewolf on the stairs. It leapt over the banister and into the hallway before it dematerialized. Once the heads left the homes they were in, the scary incidents stopped. The last known location of the Hexham heads was at Southampton University in 1978. They have since been lost and their whereabouts are unknown. The disappearance of Thelma Pauline Polly Melton. In 1981, Thelma, also known as Polly, was living in an Airstream camper with her husband. They lived half of the year in Jacksonville, Florida, and would travel to the Great Smoky Mountains for a couple of months in the fall. Polly was an avid hiker. Even though she had some minor health issues, she was still able to explore the outdoors and hike through the national park. Her husband, about 20 years older than her, did not go with her on these hikes, so she would often recruit friends to journey with her. On September 25, 1981, Polly and her husband set up their camp trailer at the Deep Creek campground. The 58-year-old outdoor enthusiast went hiking with friends in the Deep Creek area. Around 4 p.m., Polly walked ahead of her friends, who told investigators they rested as she continued over a hill on the trail and out of sight. They assumed she had returned to check on her husband at campground, but when they got back half an hour later, Polly's husband Bob said he had not seen her. Around 6 p.m. that night, the group reported her missing to a local park ranger. It was said that Poppy was familiar with the trail they were on, and there was no indication that anyone had ventured off. She was prescribed medication for high blood pressure and nausea at the time. Polly disappeared hiking with her friends in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park more than 40 years ago. Authorities say that around 400 people go mysteriously missing in Tennessee each year. That is 5 for every 100,000 people. Disappearance of Susan Walsh. Another strange cold case is the disappearance of Susan Walsh, a reporter and dancer in Nutley, New Jersey. She was last seen on July 16, 1996, when she appeared at her estranged husband, Mark's house, and hurriedly dropped off their son, David. Although she did not tell Mark where she was going or why she was in such a hurry, she told him that she would return in a few minutes. However, this was the last Mark ever saw of Susan, and while some authorities believe that she chose to vanish into the seedy subculture of New Jersey, others have found plenty of reasons why harm may have befallen her. Susan was a freelance reporter who used her history of stripping, narcotics, and alcohol abuse to investigate the prostitution industry, including a recent report on Russian mobsters in New Jersey who had been forcing young Russian women to work like slaves in New Jersey strip clubs. The article made waves in the community, but she also received multiple threats for the information that she revealed. Her friend reported discovering that she had started cutting her wrists and taking tranquilizers in addition to falling back into previous alcoholic ways. She told another friend that she had bronchitis, emphysema, mood swings, depression, and an ulcer, and frequently had to go to the hospital. In light of this, many thought that she may have simply collapsed as a result of her symptoms, but because her body was never found, police were forced to discount that theory, and instead believe that she chose to disappear. After her disappearance, there were several reported sightings of her, although none were ever verified, and some people hypothesized that she was intentionally hiding as a result of the threats that the Russian mob had leveled against her. An acquaintance of Susan, Melissa Hines, thought she spotted her next to a black car, but when she yelled to Susan, both she and the men who were with her entered the car and sped away. The car was later tracked through its license plate, and the driver admitted that he might have been with Susan that day, but could not be sure. Although the police believe she intentionally left, she left behind all of her belongings, money and medication, and her friends and family claim that she would never have left without her son. Estranged husband Mark, although not an official suspect in the case, is considered by some to have something to do with her disappearance. He refused forensic testing on their apartment and claimed that she used a payphone near their building right before disappearing, but there were no outgoing calls from that payphone. However, police have not named Mark as a suspect. No further trace of Susan has been found, and no more clues as to her disappearance have come to light, leaving her case cold and unsolved to this day. Archeologists uncover secret passage to the underworld at Pyramid of the Moon in Teotihuacan. The antique city of Teotihuacan is the subject of much curiosity, especially now that an underground tunnel was uncovered by archaeologists underneath the mystical Pyramid of the Moon. It is believed that the tunnel symbolizes the Aztec passage to the underworld. In 300 BCE, the people of Mesoamerica built the great city as they expanded their settlements. At its prime, more than 125,000 people lived in Teotihuacan. At the time, it was the 6th largest city in the entire ancient world. Robert Cowgill, an archaeologist at the University of Arizona, has stated that it was the largest city anywhere in the Western Hemisphere before the 1400s. It had thousands of residential compounds and scores of pyramid temples comparable to the largest pyramids of Egypt. It is unknown who built the city in its entirety. Teotihuacan is older than the Aztec people by an estimated entire millennium. There is evidence that a variety of cultures resided in the city through the centuries, including the Mayans, who influenced much of the architecture. Which culture or civilization created Teotihuacan cannot be confirmed, at least not with the limited evidence we have. The name itself comes from the Aztec word that means birthplace of the gods. However, Mayan hieroglyphs recognize the city as place of reeds. The city was in ruins when the Aztecs claimed it as their own, abandoned and forlorn for at least half a century, if not longer. Scholars are conflicted about what could have happened to the city. Some believe that Teotihuacan was abruptly attacked, its downfall resulting in a brutal siege by enemy forces. Other scholars argue that there is evidence that suggests a civil uprising occurred due to some unforeseen ecological catastrophe, such as famine, with the ruling class being overthrown. Another theory is that some natural disaster caused a vast population to decline and made survivors move away. There is residual proof of various buildings in Teotihuacan having been burnt. The theory of enemy civilizations ransacking the city is widely accepted by scholars nowadays, though. However, the only structures with evidence of having been burnt are the ones believed to have housed the ruling class, coming full circle and suggesting a social revolt. The Pyramid of the Moon was traced back to between 100 and 450 AD, and was used for animal and human sacrifice, though it additionally served as a burial ground for the victims of sacrifice. An altar resided in the pyramid dedicated to the great goddess of Teotihuacan. Dr. Veronica Ortega, an archaeologist, explained in the explorations carried out at the end of the 1980s, through tunnels excavated in the body of the pyramid, archaeologists Ruben Cabrera and Saburo Sugiyama found skeletons of individuals with cranial deformation. The news of this great tunnel, symbolic of the descent into the underworld meant for the victims of human sacrifice, makes us yearn for more knowledge that may never come to us, but is fascinating to consider. It is unknown whether the tunnel was added by the Aztecs or if it had already been there before them. Perhaps someday we will finally find out. We found some strange radio sources in a distant galaxy cluster. A galaxy cluster is the most massive object in the universe that keeps itself whole through its own gravitational force. They mostly contain dark matter, but also host large amounts of hot plasma. And they also contain hundreds to thousands of individual galaxies clustered together, as the name suggests. Recently, astronomers found rare radio objects inside a galaxy cluster deep inside our universe. The radio objects include a radio halo, a radio relic, and a fossil radio emission. While most galaxy clusters have some kind of radio object, the ones found in this galaxy cluster, named Able 3266, were different. Scientists have found that these radio objects do not adhere to the known theories about the origins and characteristics of radio objects, causing scientists to question those theories. Scientists believe radio halos, relics, and fossils are created when one galaxy cluster collides with another. When they collide, energy is transferred into the hot plasma that makes up galaxy clusters, which can cause a radio emission. These emissions can be generated in a wide variety of shapes and sizes. For example, radio relics are arc-shaped and can be found on the outer edges of a cluster. At the same time, halos reside more toward the cluster's center. Fossils are a bit different. Fossil radio emissions are created when a supermassive black hole dies near the center of a radio galaxy. Able 3266 is about 800 million light-years away, and is a particularly dynamic colliding system. Scientists were initially perplexed because no relics or halos were found on Able 3266, a cluster that should have had these radio objects in it. To get a better look, scientists used the ASCAP radio telescope and the Australia Telescope Compact Array to view Able 3266 in more detail. The data helped astronomers see the differences in the energy emissions coming off the galaxy cluster. They used the data to look more closely at the newly discovered radio objects and found that they do not have the same characteristics as other radio objects. This new discovery changes how scientists understand radio objects, galaxy clusters, and how they interact with the universe.
So, what do you make of these unsolved mysteries? Be sure to leave your questions and answers in the comment section below and help us to grow this community while working to solve these unexplained mysteries. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos.